G'day groovers, rockers, and in between. This is Vinyl Vibes. I'm your host, Jack Hodgins. Today we're talking with Dick St. Nicholas. You probably remember Dick Moore as the drummer of 60s rock band The Kingsmen, a role he has had since 1963. But during a touring break the Kingsmen had during the disco era, Dick Peterson released 2 solo albums under the name Dick St. Nicholas. The albums were Magic in 1979 and Sweet and Dandy in 1980. Today I'll be discussing at length for Dick his 1979 album, Magic. Magic is a disco-flavoured pop record that went to #1 in Japan, but despite this success was never released in the US. Dick is on the show today to tell me about the music on the album and why, despite its huge success in Japan, why the world never really got the chance to know the music of the great Dick St. Nicholas. G'day Dick, and welcome to Vinyl Vibes.
Well, you know what? I'm happy to be here. It was a long journey, but I made it.
And what I wanted to start with today, of course, for those that listened to our previous interview will know that you've obviously been the drummer of the Kingsmen since 1963, but what I wanted to talk about today is the 2 albums you did, Magic and Sweet and Dandy. The Kingsmen took 2 breaks. They took one during the psychedelic era and one during the disco era, and of course that's when you got your solo albums going. So I was wondering, when disco music started to come in, what is your first, coming from a rock and roll band, what did you think of disco when it was first starting to happen?
Well, disco, it was okay. It was one of these things where the dance clubs are really popular, and people thought disco music was pretty much all the same because it had that bass drum on all 4 quarter notes, boom, 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 boom. It was okay. It had a foot in R&B and it had a foot in pop music, and some pretty good artists came out of that era. As for me, I had gone to Los Angeles when we were not touring. I'd gone to Los Angeles and I wanted to learn music production, and I worked for Lamont Dozier. I was so fortunate to have met him. He said, "You want to learn music production? Come to work for me." And I was in the studio with him for 15 of his albums, and I worked for him for 3 years. And, I learned so much from he and Barney Perkins and McKinley Jack. And I also got to meet a lot of the people that they knew, which led me to people saying, some of his friends saying, why don't you do your own album? Why don't you do this? Write some songs. And, you're wanting to do this and you have all this background. Why don't you start to do something? So with a foot in disco and a foot in pop music, started writing, and one thing led to another. It was a crazy time. I had some friends who were at Epic Records and offered me a deal I couldn't turn down. So I recorded Magic with the idea that it was going to be on Epic Records. I had a little other success, a track in a movie. It was disco. It was called Thank God It's Friday. And I wrote Floyd's theme and recorded that track with basically the Lamont Dozier band. And so then, Nancy and AJ wanted me to record, and I did that. And in the middle of it all, well, not in the middle, as soon as the album was finished and I turned it into Epic, all the friends that I had at Epic, they were fired. It was wholesale firing. They got rid of all the A&R department, and my album was sitting there. So my friends got a deal with Universal MCA, and they said, "We love this album. We want to put it out. Let's buy it back from Epic." And so basically they gave me the money to buy the thing back from Epic, but Epic did not tell their international division that they no longer had the rights to Magic. My manager at the time was over at Midem in France and saw some people from Japan, and they had my album under their arm, and he said, "How do you have that?" And they said, "Oh, we put it out, and it's starting to climb the charts. People are loving it." Well, they didn't have the rights to put it out. So I got kind of in a big boondoggle thing where I didn't have much of a case to sue them because I was having success, and the court would have just said, "But, how is it hurting you to have a #1 album?" We just went with it, hoping that maybe they put it out. It came out in Mexico, and it came out in other countries, but never in the United States, never in Europe. But wherever it did come out, unfortunately, I had great success. So I got to go to Japan. I did a couple of tours over there performing, and I produced an album over there for Hiro Sonoda, who's a jazz drummer. He had a big band, and really a neat guy, neat band. And I did all the TV shows. It was a really good experience.
Yeah. In terms of the writing process, did you, in writing those kind of disco pop flavored songs, did they come easy to you, in terms of writing them?
Well, I don't think it was hard. I mean, I didn't labor over it. In the day, you kind of took click phrases. Somebody might say something, or there might be a phrase for the day or in the time, and you take those phrases and just write a song around them, you know. Or you hear somebody say something. Somebody might say, "Oh, I just love her. She's my music." That's a great line. Okay, so you write a song around it. And, you know, I learned that from Lamont. They had the majority of the hit records on Motown. You know, they wrote, produced the Supremes and the Temptations and the Four Tops and all these other acts. They were huge. And Lamont had his own company. He left Motown and had his own production company. And we recorded all kinds of stuff. You know, Billy Davis and Marilyn McCoo. We did Aretha Franklin. We just did there's a ton. Edwin Starr, a ton of R&B artists.
I was listening to the album Magic, and I mean, track one, Magic, the title track, and I was wondering too, like, you mentioned the music production there you're doing, and I was kind of thinking, when you wrote that song, took it into the studio, was it completely finished, or like, did you add things here and there in the studio?
Yeah, my partner and I, he co-produced it. He's one of my best friends, and Belton Ray Bunch. And when I wrote the songs, I showed him the songs, and we did some arrangements. We hired the best studio musicians. You know, I had access to all these guys because of Lamont. I had met, you know, some really Steve Schaefer, and you know, if you look at the credits on the album, it's just top tier people. And Lee Sklar, I mean, he played all the bass on the whole first album. I just had really stellar people. We just got together and had some, I don't know, I think maybe it was about 5 or 6 recording sessions where we did the tracks and maybe some percussion in different sessions. And the whole thing took, I don't know, maybe a month to record. And then he and I took the album, the tracks up to Sausalito, California at the record plant. We did all of our mixing and sweetening up there. I did my vocals up there.
What instruments were you playing on the album? I know that you've been a long-time drummer of the Kingsmen. Did you play drums on the album?
I did not play drums on that album. I did play keyboards, piano. I played some synthesizer. I played some guitar. Just the other stuff that I play. But when I wrote the songs on piano, and I think I wrote a couple on guitar. But when we were laying down the track, you know, we would get a click track, a metronome in our earphones, and I just chose to play my piano parts, and Steve Schaefer was on drums, Lee Sklar was on bass. We had a really good rhythm section. We just played live until we got the take we wanted.
Some great people on there, and I was thinking too, I was listening to track 2, Help Yourself, and there's a great sax solo on there. Like, there's some great sax playing. I was wondering, who is that playing sax on that track?
You know, it escapes my memory. He was a top tier. Was it Pete Chrislieb? I think it might have been, because I know Pete was in the band when we laid the horn tracks down. We had like the number one horn section that was on every disco pop record. They're credited on the album, and I think it was Pete Chrislieb who, when we got to that section, he just laid out a sax solo. It's been so long, I don't remember. I hope they'll forgive me, but I don't remember names.
That's all right. No.
You know, I had the guitar player from Toto, Steve Lukather. Yeah, he was playing guitar. He did the solo work on there, along with another guitar player we had on a different session.
When we spoke last time, you mentioned how you kind of came from originally a classical musical background, and I was wondering, in the writing process, or in any way, shape or form, when you're doing writing Magic, like the album, I mean, did that classical musical background come in handy at all?
Actually, it did. It did come in handy. I hit the ground running with Lamont, and although I had the success with the Kingsmen, and we were basic rock and roll, we were like a party band. But I had an understanding of music, and then learning what I learned with Lamont and McKinley Jackson, who was one of the arrangers with him, plus Belton Ray Bunch, who's a really talented guy. You know, he's a fantastic musician and arranger. He's done a lot of television. You know, he worked with Mike Post, and I think he still does. He got an Emmy for one of the television shows he does. He did, I don't know what shows you have down there, but we had some really popular shows here. The Rockford Files. Well, what was the one where the guy jumped into the future? Oh, I can't remember what it was, but he's had a lot of success in the industry. So yeah, it did help a lot.
Kind of mentioned a little bit before your kind of writing process, a lot of that was on piano, and I'm kind of thinking, I guess it's kind of connected with your classical music background. I mean, when you were writing the songs, did you write like the notes on a piece of paper, like the actual like music down?
Actually, no. I did. I mean, when we did the chart, we wrote down the different melodies that we wanted or counter melodies that we wanted. We wrote those down, but basically did a chord chart and let the people. We just created a groove and started playing, and everybody added their ideas. And if we had an idea for a certain riff here, like in Magic, da 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 ba ba da da bum bum bum. The horn parts there, that was all written out. But the drum parts, the guitar, the rhythm section, that stuff, we created pretty much on the spot to what I was playing.
The third track is "What's the Reason," and that's one of my favourite tracks off the album. And I was listening to the strings on that album, and I was wondering, did you arrange the strings on that track?
Ray and I did, yes. And that is I would love to re-record that song, because with the technology and the sounds we have today, the choir could really be a big song. I really like that song. And it was me really questioning life. I just kind of didn't get it. What God had in mind for everyone. Why is there so much of this and that and heartache, and what is the reason? And I really do like that song. I'm glad it's one of your favorites.
When you're writing that song, on the piano or on the guitar, whatever, however you did it, I mean, that chorus on that song, like that big chorus, and I was thinking, when you were writing that and you finally, like, whatever your process was and you got to that, and the first time you kind of played that chorus to yourself, I mean, that must have been a moment when you realized you just wrote it like a really good song.
Well, I suppose so. Everything, it turned out like we were hearing it. Now that I'm, all these years later, I could hear it being done even bigger. And we have different effects available today. The reverbs were a little bit more limiting. You were more limited with the size of the string section and what you were doing. I'll tell you, I've always had a fondness for that song. It's meant so much to me spiritually.
I think you mentioned earlier you had a lot to do with the production side of things on the record, and I was thinking, like, we mentioned the strings on that song earlier, but I think they sit really well in the mix of the song, and I was kind of thinking, did you have a lot to do with the mixing of that album?
Oh, absolutely. Fortunately, Ray and I mixed, the engineer we had was Tom Fly. And Tom, of course, you could look him up. He's done so many hits. He got his break. He did the album for, what's the name of that thing where all the artists got together out in the field? He was the engineer and recorded Jimi Hendrix, and he also recorded Starry, Starry Night. Tom Fly, and is a brilliant engineer. So Ray and I mixed the album with him.
And we were talking at the beginning of the interview a bit about the disco era, and I know that, I was thinking, you got into the music a bit, like, that pop kind of disco sound you have on those records, but I was also wondering, I mean, did you get into the fashion that the disco era brought with it, like, the flares and the big collars that, they used to wear back in the 70s? Did you ever get into that kind of fashion?
I did when I toured, and I did when I was doing television and interviews and those sorts of things when I was, touring in Japan and all. I did wear the Florida look, but I didn't when I wasn't working. When I wasn't working, I was just relaxing, and I just wore my blue jeans and a shirt. But out and about, I pretty much looked like the album cover.
In our last interview, towards the end of it, we talked about a little bit about Magic, the album, but we also talked about Can't Give Up. And you've already told the story about how, you wrote it about a couple you knew, and you thought it was a good relationship, and like with these people, and they were kind of breaking it off. And I was kind of thinking, like, did they ever get back together, the people you wrote about the song about?
Actually, they both healed, and I've kept in touch with my female friend, and she married. She's had children, and I heard from her just about a week ago. I was friends also with her family, her father, and she married someone else, and she's extremely happy. And they've been married, I think, 25, 30 years. So, life life moved on, and I really liked them together. I thought they were great, and I was trying to encourage them, but I guess the song didn't make a difference.
Well, it's a good song anyway. And I was kind of thinking too, I mean, I think you mentioned this a little bit earlier, and you also mentioned it last time we talked, that a lot of the songs you write are kind of based off life experiences of what you're feeling at the time. And I mean, do you find it hard to write songs when on a topic when you're not feeling a certain way, or when, you know, it's not on, if you're not writing about something that's actually has happened to you in life, or like, you know, like, I mean, you can't like them.
I think it is much more difficult to write a song that you're given a topic about than a song that you're inspired to write. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean it has to happen to me. If I'm part of the experience, whatever the song is, if I'm part of that experience, it's much easier than somebody saying, you know, write a song about this or write a song about that. You know, those contract works for maybe a short or a documentary or whatever. They're much more difficult because all of a sudden you're trying to write something for a producer or a director, and it has to be what they want instead of them hearing something you've written and saying, I want that for this section. You know, if it's in a film, they look for tracks, and if somebody says, I need a song about, you know, boy meets girl, boy loses girl, and it's not the kind of thing they want, then it's a lot tougher.
I was listening to track 5, Our Goodbyes, and I was thinking too, like, we talked a bit about, you know, how you compose on the piano and all that, but I was thinking, like, because you write the music first, then the lyrics, like, or like you write the music, then the melody, like, how does that work for you?
Actually, for me, the music comes first. I usually get the hook, the line, like Our Goodbye. And the whole thing was Our Goodbye doesn't have to be forever. And I that kind of just wrote itself melodically. And then I just went ahead and wrote the music part and filled in the lyrics. And if you look on the album, I have friends or acquaintances or family members or something, and I might be stuck in a place here or there. And maybe they'll say, well, how about It Feels Right? Well, to me, that's co-writing. So they might come up with one line or two or a word or whatever, but it does make the song. And so that's how I write with other people. Very difficult to write a song, for me anyway, in a collaborative effort when it comes to lyrics. When it comes to the music, my cousin and I are writing now, and we've been writing together for quite some time. It's not pop music, it's not radio material, but it's very easy for us to write music, and then I usually write most of the lyrics to it.
Our Last Goodbyes, I was thinking, you know, we're talking about how a lot of the songs you write about things going on, and I mean, what inspired that song? Like, was there something going on in your life at the time you had to say goodbye to? I mean, for the song Our Goodbyes, like, yeah, how did that come to be?
Actually, I have a really, really good friend who lives in California, and I'm really good friends with his family. His daughter was going through a breakup, and he asked me if they could come up to my place. I was living up in Montecito at the time, up in Santa Barbara area. It's a very, very nice place in California, and I was living there, and they asked if they could come up for the weekend. He wanted her to get away. She was going through some things. She happened to say that, you know, we were talking about her boyfriend. They had been together for quite a while, and she just said, Our Goodbye was so hard. She liked him really well. She loved him, and this just wasn't working. And so I had horses at the time, and the three of us took the horses. We rode on the beach for a couple of days, and that was just percolating in me. And I thought, you know, you're such good friends that when you say Our Goodbye, it doesn't have to be forever. It's just till you're together again. And then the song just came out. I wrote it. I played it for her, and, you know, I think it helped. So it was more of a medicinal thing for her, you know, because once people realize you need to make friends as well as just be in love with someone. And so I really wrote the song about her relationship, you know, because the goodbye doesn't have to be forever. It's just till you're together again if you like each other. You can love someone and maybe the relationship doesn't work, but you also can really like that person and they can be one of your best friends forever.
A lot of your songs, there's a common theme, like they're about relationships, they're about friendship, they're about love. I mean, would you say that I'm right on that one?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. Good observation. I think so. As you're talking about, you know, Born to Love You, and Our Goodbye doesn't have to be forever. You can't give up. You know, you need to help yourself. She's my music. Yeah, those are all those are all in that vein. So I think you probably hit something there.
For you as the writer and as a musician and a songwriter, why do you think it's those themes that inspire so much in you in terms of songwriting?
Well, I don't know if anyone can answer that, but I remember that Sammy Cahn, the famous songwriter, Sammy Cahn had one of his quotes was, the reason he writes songs and the reason they're so popular is he says, I love you for people who don't know how to say it. And that's why his songs were so huge, and that's what he felt. He knew how to say things in song that people could give to each other that didn't really know how to do that. So that was his idea. You write songs not just to get out your emotion, but maybe it'll help somebody else. Maybe you'll be expressing a feeling or an emotion or an experience that somebody else is feeling. Maybe it just helps you. So I think it's all of it. You write, and it just depends on what's happening to you at the time, what your focus is, what your inspiration is. For me, I can write symphonic music, which is what this film I'm working on is all based around, is symphonic music. I can write symphonic music by going out by myself to some area. I don't care if it's a desert or a forest, mostly forest, but go out into the mountains or where, someplace, get away, look at the stars, whatever. And I start hearing it. I hear a whole orchestra in my head, and then I can come back and put those melodies to the piano and start orchestrating.
Listening to the album, track 6, Born to Love, and it kind of returns us back to that kind of more disco kind of flavor. You have those songs before it, and then it kind of turns us back to that kind of disco kind of sound. And in terms of in terms of the track listing, was that important to you that the album had a certain track listing?
I don't know that, when you're producing an album, that's one of the things you do is you put things in an order when you give it to the record company. You're hearing the songs over and over and over until they don't sound good anymore sometimes. And they go, oh man, that's just not good. You have to get away from them. But the order, at least for us, Tom and Ray and myself, at least the album sort of wrote itself in terms of the order of material. It just seemed like they went together because of the keys. They went together because of the tempos, the tempo changes and when things needed to be here and there. As took us a month to mix the album, listening to things over and over and over. You think, oh, Our Goodbye has to follow Can't Give Up. Born to Love You, we need an up-tempo song after Our Goodbye. Born to Love You, it really worked right there. So when you're producing an album and you're collaborating on the production, I think it just sort of writes itself because you hear things over and over and over and over. And by the way, Born to Love You was a really fun track to do. I had the keyboard lick, and I wanted a synthesizer. And in those days, there weren't a lot of companies that had synthesizers. It was just getting to be popular. And Joff at Oberheim, he had this new keyboard, and he brought it to the studio. And instead of playing it on piano, I could play it on his synthesizer, and it was just really a cool sound. And that, the rhythm, I kind of played drums on that keyboard track. Even though the chords changed, it was a rhythmic drum lick on the keyboard track. We had so much fun just recording that track because, Josh is a really cool guy. Steve Shaper and Leland Sklar. Lee, he's just, about Lee. He's played probably on 200 hit records. The guy is phenomenal. He's one of the best bass players in the world. He's played everything from country and been on so many country hits. He's gone out with Toto, when their best bass player couldn't make their tours. He plays every kind of music. He's really a super talented guy, and I love him to death. He also is a hot rodder. He has a hot rod. He's had his hot rod on the cover of Hot Rod magazine, and he looks like a total stoner. He's got this long beard like ZZ Top, but he's a true love. He's not into drugs. He's not into weird stuff. It's just his look. And people, if you start watching videos, you see this amazing bass player who's got a white beard standing in the background. That's Lee. He's out. I think last week he sent me an email, and he is who did he say he was out with right now? He's out with geez, I forgot who he said he was out with, but he's on tour again still. He's still playing better than ever.
I mean, you talked about how obviously that was a very fun track to record, and I was listening very closely to the track, and it sounds like on the vocals you have some double tracking going on there. Like, did you do a lot of double tracking on the album?
No, as a matter of fact, I don't think we double tracked too much, but we did use a doubling device that was brand new. People are still using them now, and they're more subtle, but you use a doubling device to kind of soften your voice, make it sound a little bit bigger, and it's just a digital delay. And you can set how far apart you want the delay. If it's 2 milliseconds, 700 milliseconds, and it can sound like it's double tracked, but it does make you bigger. If you listen to the tracks these days by singers, they use a digital delay on their echo. You can like, Taylor Swift and these people, they'll have their voice be very present, but right behind it, the reverb and the echo, the repeating, is right behind the organic voice, and they use digital delay on the repeating. But back in those days, we used the digital delay right on the main vocal.
And of course, moving on in the track listing of the album, I mean, track 7, "Sad Price to Pay." That another great melody, but also the lyrics on that song. I think that would have to be lyrically probably my favorite song off that album of yours, because I mean that one's like, it tells a story. I mean, yeah, it's very lyrical, that song, wouldn't you say, Dick?
Yeah, I agree with you. I looking back on it, it seems like when you're in the entertainment industry, your friends are really the audience, and here I am alone on this stage. I'm singing to all of my friends. It seems like a sad price to pay, but that's what we do. And that's why it's so hard, I think, for people to have relationships with people who entertain and they're singing on stage, and they're trying to please an audience and create a career for themselves. It seems like it really is a sad price to pay, because a lot of us end up alone. Yeah, I agree with you. It seems like a sad price to pay to lose that someone. But then again, there you are. You're singing to that audience, and the show must go on.
Like, I was listening to the song, and there's some lyrics in there I wanted to bring up, and the lyrics are in the song. "I made some friends who really cared about me. They wanted me to have the best life could give." And I was kind of thinking, I mean, we spoke about, like, in our last interview, we spoke about that, that your longtime friendship with Mike Mitchell. And I was thinking, like, when you were writing that specific line, I mean, were you kind of thinking about your friendship with Mike Mitchell? That you've met some friends who really cared about you. They wanted to give you all the best life would give. I mean, that kind of made me think maybe you were thinking about Mike when you wrote that lyric.
Well, I think about Mike every day. Mike, it was my family. He's a brother. We have been through so much together, over 50 years of friendship. And I do think about him every single day. He was a fantastic person. And yeah, he's part of that song. The truth is, I think Mike's a little piece of everything I do, because he has such an influence on me. He's slightly older. I looked up to him. He was somebody that you could want to be like. Yeah, definitely. I think you hit on something there.
I mean, in saying that too, I mean, like, when you finished the album, I mean, what did Mike think of the album when it came out, or when you showed him, or whatever? He
and my family, my aunts and my uncles and my cousin that I work with now, Kim, everybody was surprised. That they were surprised that I could sing. We're surprised that I could write that sort of thing. Because, most of us, when we had our jam sessions in our families, we sang country music. I think I brought that up before. Mike would even go up and spend the weekend at my uncle's, and my uncle and my dad played guitar, and they sang country music, and we would have maybe anywhere 5 guys, 4 guys to 10 people sitting around playing country music. And so when I've got this album, I've done a solo album, Mike just loved it. He supported it. So, I mean, I can't tell you how much he he supported what I was doing, but he was surprised. And so was my family. They were all like, where did that come from? You know, they thought I'd be writing symphonic kind of stuff or rock and roll, but I've never, it was just a surprise. It was just a surprise to everyone.
Of course, moving on now, like to the eighth track, I think you're up to, "She's My Music." And that's another song that for me stands out on that album. "She's My Music," like that's just such a good song. Like, I mean, how did that come to be? That song, like, what inspired it? Like, yeah, like take me through that.
I had heard somebody talk about the person that they loved, and he said, "Oh yeah, she's my music." You know. And it just sort of resonated with me. And I had an acoustic guitar, and I started playing something to "She's My Music." You know, the song just came from hearing that line.
Were you like listening to a lot of the songs that were coming out at that point in '79 and trying to like write something that would appeal to audiences then?
I don't really know that I was trying to write songs like other people. What I was trying to do was produce an album that was of the day. You know, it had a foot in disco. Most of the songs has a disco kind of drum. The bass drum and on the faster songs or the songs that are up tempo, they have a kind of a foot in disco, and then they also have a foot in pop. So it just was the style that I was doing at the time. It wasn't like I was trying to, this will make top 40 or whatever. It was a collection of songs, and, you know, AJ Cervantes and Nancy Sane, they're the ones that wanted me to record an album. They were the ones that really started backing me. Go ahead, write whatever you want, you know, and we'll put it out. Of course, they ended up having Butterfly Records, which was an all disco label. You know, I remember when I first started working with Lamont, and the very first sequencing machine came out, and it was only a one-note sequencer, but you could trigger whatever you wanted, and that's what people used in disco. They were triggering a bass drum and playing their tracks to that, and that inspired some stuff. Not only that I wrote, but the things that Lamont was doing and that other people were, because your bass drum, you could just let it go. Nobody had to play it. The drummer didn't have to play it. It was just boom, 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 boom. It was relentless. It was kind of a fun thing. We were all amazed that you could have one note play over and over, and it could trigger your bass drum. And that's what they were into. So listening to that, I think everything that you're going through, all of the experiences, that old thing, you know, that you're the sum total of your existence, I think that's your music as well. If you're somebody who likes to write music or perform music or just enjoy things for yourself, it's because of all the things you've been through, all the things you've heard. Everybody has an influence on everybody. At least I think. You hear something on the radio or the radio back then, they have an influence on you. You know, it becomes part of what you do. I just wanted to make something good. If I'm gonna write a song and I'm gonna do an album, I want them to be something that I would be proud of. Back in 1979, and it accomplished that. I remember also, I have to tell you this about Magic. I was in Japan, and I was in a suburb or a section of Tokyo, and I was standing on a street corner. All of these, you know, in Japan, there's a lot of people everywhere, and these girls were singing Magic. I didn't know them. They didn't know I was there. They just were singing it. And I'll tell you, that made me feel like a gazillion dollars when I heard somebody that does not know me, and it's across the universe, as far as I was concerned, somebody over there is singing something that I had written. It was a thrill of a lifetime. I will never forget it.
We did talk about like how, you know, it didn't get released in the US, and I'm kind of thinking, I mean, which I know, as you probably remember from my last interview, I was like, well, that's just, yeah, it should have obviously been released in the US. And I mean, is looking back now for you, is there any way, is there any possible way that it could have been released in the US? Is there anything looking back now you could have done, like, you know, contacted somebody, or did you know someone that could have made it happen? Like, is there any way, shape, or form looking back now? Yeah.
You know, the problem is, and I'm saying this with respect, but also tongue-in-cheek. The problem with the record company is, in those days anyway, I'm not in tune with them now, because record companies are really an internet business. It's a download business. But in those days, the record companies were run by A&R people. And I have never met an A&R person, and I'm telling you, I've met a lot because I've worked for a lot of different labels. I've never met one that wasn't a person who was a musician who tried to make it, but they couldn't. They weren't successful. They all, well, I played sax, I played guitar in a band, I did this in a band, I was a drummer, I was a whatever, and now they're in A&R. It was such a frustration that somebody in a record label could say, "Oh, this is fantastic," and it doesn't make it, and then they don't like something that they turn down that does make it. What's his name? He's an English manager, producer, and he brought Elton John over to the United States. And Elton John got turned down by label after label after label because the A&R people could not hear it. They didn't have the vision. And Don Arden, and when he finally took it to MCA, he did a 2-album deal with them. He said, "I've got Elton John, and I've got this disco group," and I think they were called Platinum. "I've got a disco group, and I've got this guy, Elton John." They said, "The disco is so hot, we'll do it." "Well, if you'll take Elton John, I'll give you Platinum." These guys were idiots. You gave us an album, and now we can't put it out on MCA because we don't have the rights to it. They want to buy it, and it's a hit in Japan. But these new people, these new A&R losers, I'll have to say, these people don't have an ear, and they just didn't want it. It wasn't something that they had backed, and it was all about egos. And and the album it has a datedness to it. A&R people, I don't think they can hear. They throw everything up against the wall, and then whatever hits, they take credit for. They don't have an ear, and my manager had arguments with them, and it wasn't the album that they wanted to put out. They were putting other stuff out, and they couldn't sell it to MCA because I was already released in Japan, which is a huge audience, a huge market for them, and they didn't want to release it in the States, and it just is part of the story.
And I mean, will we ever see another Dick St. Nicholas album, like a third Dick St. Nicholas album? Will that ever happen?
I have no idea. There'll be a soundtrack with this film, and of course, I use my real name doing this film. The film project is all mine, and I'm hoping it'll make a difference. I think it'll be out in a couple of years, but that would be possibly a third album. I'm not sure I'll be doing many vocals on it, but the soundtrack definitely has the music I've written.
Yeah, look, I just want to thank you so much for making the time again to talk with me, Dick, because I think, Magic is a great album, and it's great to be able to talk about how it came to be, and just thanks for making the time to talk about it.
Well, thank you, and you know what? It's my pleasure. I love that you go back into history and pull things up like this. It keeps those things alive, and even though it has a lot of age on it, I love the album too. I'm very proud of it. We had so much fun. I'm not sure that many people work with their best friends, but Ray and I and Tom and the musicians, I got to work with my best friends on that album, and it was just at the time of my life. It was so ideal to be able to work with your friends and create what you heard. I'm just grateful for them for all of their help.
That was the greatest disco star that you haven't heard, Dick St. Nicholas. Dick is no longer recording as Dick St. Nicholas, but you can check out his work as the drummer of the Kingsmen at louie.org. Remember to share this episode with other music fans. And if you really enjoyed this edition, let us know. Thank you for tuning in to this edition of Vinyl Vibes, and to all you music lovers out there, stay groovy.